and it's the accumulation of all these tiny touch points that make an incredible experience. So you walk out and you go, that was incredible.
This week we're diving into part 2 of our episode with Jack Thomas, owner of Base Bangkok and also the co-creator of the Fit Guide. And in this episode we're diving in to the Fit Guide. Now this guide was created to create the top standards of gyms across the world. And in this episode you're going to find out what it takes to become a top 1% gym in the world. We hope you enjoy this episode.
It's only about 3 to 4% of the gyms that we have visited that have got 90% plus. Very best of the best in the industry. You don't need a degree in marketing or customer service or hospitality to do these things. Like really anyone can do it, but you do need the right attitude. 6.5% of studios made an attempt to close a sale when an evaluator was expressing interest. It's terrible for everyone. You're gonna lose 80% of sales, I would say, by not just asking a couple of questions. I was like, wow, you remembered me from 3 weeks ago. I only came once. And it just had this unbelievable disproportionate impact. Mind the gap is his little phrase. GAP is the 3 things you can do to really be 5-star. Genuine interest. Anticipatory service. Personalization. An awesome journey. It's made me a better business owner.
This episode is brought to you by Stride DNA, the DNA testing service that helps coaches, PTs, and gym owners take their client programming to the next level. Ever wondered why some clients thrive on certain workouts while others burn out? It all comes down to genetics. Stride DNA gives you science-backed insights into how your clients respond to training, recover, and process nutrients, so you can tailor workouts, refine diets, and optimize recovery for faster results. It's not just game-changing for clients, it's an easy additional revenue stream for your business. Offer DNA-driven coaching as part of a premium package or earn commission on test kits. It's quick, simple, and Stride gives you all the tools and education you need. The best part, it's quick and easy. Your clients take a swab, send it off, and in days, you'll be able to implement the change they need to thrive in their fitness journey. So if you want to future-proof your coaching, get real results, and boost your revenue, visit getstride.com today.
Welcome back to part 2 of the podcast with Jack Thomas. So the reason we put it into 2 parts is I have a big list of questions or big list of notes on my iPad, and I asked the first question and we created an entire podcast episode from just conversation. So we spoke about Jack's journey in the fitness industry, him creating the gym, the free gyms, and the challenges and tribulations along that. And there were so many valuable lessons. It was such an epic podcast. So if you haven't listened to that one, I would recommend checking that one out before this, because a lot of what we're going to cover, now we're going to flip to the Fit Guide, which dives into the data of 250 gyms across different countries and over 100,000 data points. So this is going to be really good. But I would say that Jack's gyms are a kind of a case study of a lot of the data of what you should and should not be doing. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I hope so. So when we first started the Fit Guide, it was with a good friend of mine, Matthew Lavender, who was in hospitality. So he worked at Forbes Travel Guide, and he developed the process that hotels, spas, restaurants went through to become 5-star or 4-star. So when we decided to start this Fit Guide, it was kind of marrying his background in hospitality, my background in fitness. So whilst we did bring a lot of what I'd learned at Base and all the stuff that we talked about in the last episode, it's made me a better business owner. It's made me a better coach for sure. It's made me had a closer look at our systems, because we have gone so in depth in terms of the client experience and how you build that, how you do it at scale, and how the world's best gyms are doing that. So yeah, it is marrying kind of hospitality and my background in fitness, but man, it's been an awesome journey. It's about 2 years ago we launched.
And I think that after listening to this or going through the Fit Guide and looking at a lot of these data points, what you're going to learn is that a lot of the things you need to do to get in those higher brackets aren't that complicated.
Yes.
They're very simple things, which is really good news, right? Because so many people overcomplicate things, where a lot of the things in here that will get you into that higher level, again, are quite simple things, but they're just missed. And they're probably missed, and we spoke about this in the last episode, is because like the business isn't systematized enough. But once you create that, you can fill this in. So we're going to run through this. But first of all, what's the process of putting this together? Yeah. How do you go ahead and get this data? Like, how do you rank the gyms? Yeah. And I know people can read it and run through, but I'd love to dive into more detail here.
Sure, you made an absolutely the right point. You said it's not particularly hard or particularly complicated. So I guess I want to break down what that means exactly. So when we decided to put this process together or start this project, and it was over a few beers in Bangkok in 2022 and learning about what Matthew did in hospitality, and I literally had a look at his process and what he went through with gyms, with hotels, and looking at the things that he looked for in your Ritz-Carltons, your St. Regis's, like the best hotels in the world, I looked at it and I thought, A, none of these things are particularly complicated or difficult. B, we should absolutely be doing these things in the fitness industry. So of course you had standards around cleanliness and the quality of, well, the fixtures and fittings that would be in the hotel, but equipment would be the obvious one for gyms. Most of it looked at the human interactions, right? The little intangible things that make up the experience.
The things that you don't initially think about when you go to a gym, like the things that you've marked on this report, they're not things that, as the business owner, I think that many people are consciously thinking about. Is that fair to say? It's like these small things that make a big difference that are maybe easily missed.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's the combination of small things. And I use the analogy, the talk I did at Performex of if you have a Michelin star restaurant, you don't, let's say a 3-star Michelin star restaurant, you do not just put 20, 30 people in there who are good at what they do and say, off you go, guys, do your things. You meticulously break down the whole client journey from the moment they arrive. How do you welcome them? How do you use their name? How do you show them to the table? Every single little part of the journey is important, and it's the accumulation of all these tiny touch points that make an incredible experience. So you walk out and you go, that was incredible. The same as if you stay at the Ritz-Carlton. It's very systematically broken down into lots of little things. And if you get 200, well, in a hotel it's 800 touch points. We've broken it down to 250 touch points. But let's use the hotel analogy for a moment. If those 800 things are done, the end result of that is you walk out and think, this place is incredible. This place is world class. It was worth dropping £1,000 a night on that particular experience. We've then broken that down into the fitness industry with 250 things that we need to do across the client journey. And if you do those, and we've seen some gyms that have scored 90% plus, that gets our highest award. You come out and you think, wow, that is great. It's professional. They got to know me. They gave me attention to my individual form and technique. They learned my name. They checked in with me after the class. They knew I had an injury and they adapted the session based on that. They laid out the session so I knew exactly what was coming up. I feel amazing. That was a great class.
So my question for you is, what does it take to become a gym that's in the top 1% of gyms in the world?
So when we go into a new city, let's take New York as an example, the first city we went into, and we've recently launched New York for the second year of evaluations. So the first stage is kind of an R&D phase to see, or a research phase, to see what are the leading gyms in the city. So we would look at what ranks well on Google, what has good Google reviews, ClassPass reviews. We would speak to people on the ground, so based within the city, what are the best gyms, people within the industry. And so we bring it down to a short list of around 40 to 50 gyms. So already that would be seen, we hope, at the top 20 or 30% of gyms. If they don't hit certain criteria in terms of how they're presented online, or perhaps the reviews they've got or what we've heard, we wouldn't visit them. Then when we take each of these clubs through this anonymous 250 standard process, and so that's more on Matt's side. He's trained up what we call experience evaluators. That's very much taking his background in hospitality. So we train people that have good attention to detail, very observant, good at remembering things and can record it well, so that we see the report is done in a very sort of thorough, consistent way amongst all the gym visits we do. Once they go through that anonymous process, 250 standards, it's only about 3 to 4% of the gyms that we have visited that have got 90% plus. Wow. So that gets our highest award, the Fit Guide 5-star award. So if we're already looking at the top 20%, and it's only 3 or 4% of that, getting over 90% of 250 standards is representative of that very best of the best in the industry.
So just to summarize, you create a short list and then you have people that will anonymously visit those gyms for the experience to check out how it is.
Correct. So we have 3 experience evaluators, for example, based in New York, right? We usually want females, but we do have a male there as well, because the females can do like bar classes, which typically aren't done as often by males. We won't stand out as much. But we have male evaluators as well. We would say, look, these are the 40 gyms that we've shortlisted. Go and visit each one. And so each process takes about 8 hours. So our evaluator would get there half an hour before, at least 20 minutes before, half an hour before, to give them an opportunity to do all the things that we'd like to see.
And so, for instance, I know one of the points is if they show up early, what does the front of house do to accommodate them?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of standards around that. Are they given an orientation? Are they seen promptly? Is eye contact made? Do they smile? Are they introduced to the coach or the instructor in some way? Are they informed where to wait? Are they told when the class would start? So yeah, we arrive early. It's not like we arrive, 2 minutes before the class starts and we're rushed. Obviously, they're not going to be able to do these things then. There's not going to be enough time if it's busy, but we always arrive very early. And so it gives ample opportunity to do all the things. So if a club comes back to us and says, well, no, our coaches do this, we know for sure they didn't. And so the evaluators, not only do they mark each standard yes or no, was it achieved, there's a comment that's left with it. So the whole process takes around about 7 or 8 hours.
And does the gym owner know that they may have someone come into the gym to be assessed, or do you pick them and then they're going in, or does the gym owner have to kind of register to be part of this process?
We just select them, so it's completely independent.
Wow.
So again, it's just like the Michelin Guide, right? You can't pay to play in the Michelin Guide. You can't pay
register.
To play in the Fit Guide.
They just may show up, and
they may show up. Yeah. So I think the first year, no one knew who we were, but now we're a bit more well known. So maybe some people know we're coming in, but because we're not the Michelin Guide yet, that's 120 years old. I don't think they're really looking out for us just yet. When we go in, we really are seeing the absolute real experience of someone going into that club, and that's given us like a very, very unique insight into the industry.
Yeah, that's incredible, because you're literally investing in getting so many people to physically go into all of these gyms and collecting the data. Must be a difficult process to gather all of this, right?
Yeah, that's more Matthew's background, because he's done this with Forbes Travel Guide, and they had, I think, 100 evaluators around the world constantly doing evaluations. So that's 800 standards, and so he had to do the quality control checks. He was global head of evaluation, so he kind of made sure that it was consistent with a massive network. So this, in comparison, it is quite small, but to me, looking in as like a newcomer to this process, it's huge, and it's part of Matt's role, especially, to make sure that it's consistent. So if someone goes to Singapore and evaluates a Pilates class there, or someone goes to a strength and conditioning class in New York, we're evaluating it in exactly the same way. And it's been fascinating to work with someone who's just so good at what they do, like Matthew in hospitality and evaluations especially. And I've just learned so much from that. But I can honestly say it's staggering, really, just the level of accuracy, consistency, and just how in-depth it allows us to see what's going on in the industry.
And it's definitely going to increase the standards within gyms across the board, because if you are a gym that has been reviewed, next time, the way you behave moving forward, you're just going to act like you're consistently being reviewed every single day. So you're going to make sure that you're going to be on point. So it's actually such a great tool to help elevate the standards in the industry there as well. So how do you rank each gym in terms of like what categories do you place them in to determine how good they are at certain elements?
So we have, and again, we sort of went back and forth with this process, and we ran it by a lot of gyms, but we thought the process best lends itself, we thought, to boutique clubs, and by that, like kind of class-based boutique clubs. We are looking now at branching out into big box, and then maybe like small group personal training gyms as well. I think, honestly, small group personal training, our process lends itself very well to.
And you do have small group personal training gyms in the report, because you have the Foundry, you have FMA client, House of Fitness, Rez in there as well. Yeah. He made it in.
Yep, so we actually visited the class for Foundry. So they actually have a class.
I see.
Really, the Foundry scored very well, scored very well, but it's not really so lent to our process because it's built more for group classes.
Yeah.
And so for them, for example, they don't have front desk staff. It's just the coaches checking in, but they still scored very, very well. They got our award of excellence. So it shows that they're doing a very, very good job. So, but we didn't actually evaluate the small group personal training.
It was just the class section of it.
It was just the class section. And they still scored very well. Honestly, if we build a process out for small group personal training, they would score even better for that, for sure, right? So that's a little bit of a twist on what we do, which we are definitely looking at. But we're looking at, your Soul Cycles, your Barriers boot camps, your One Rebels, your F45s, your Orange Theories, Pilates studios, yoga, cycling, any S&C unit, for example.
But I think that if you are a small group training provider, listen to this, there's still so many insights that you can take on 100%. How to improve your service, because the markers that I run through are all can all be translated into your service.
Honestly, even if you run like a small boutique hotel, you could actually look at our report and there'd be a whole ton of things you could take away. And if you do personal training, like I said to you, I think before we hit record, it's made me a better coach. Like now as a coach, I make sure I kind of tick these boxes, but done in a way that's, making sure they have a much better experience. So even if you're a coach listening to this, I'd highly recommend that. We'll give you a special link so that your listeners can get it for free.
Amazing.
Look at the standards as a coach, small group personal training, really anything in fitness, but the process is really built specifically to class-based boutique fitness.
And on my notes here, because the report itself is extensive, it's over 200 pages long. I know you've got different variations of the report as well. What I've done is rather than just gather all the data and go for it piece by piece, because we'd be here for a long time, I have taken the pieces that have a low average score throughout the process. And the reason
the most interesting part.
Yeah, because the reason I decided to do this is because it's where's the gap that can be filled by most. And again, the gaps to be filled aren't that hard to fill up, but it's just once they're pointed out to you, you go, oh, okay, we can do that, and can we build that into our process? So there's 5 categories. So let's start with category 1, which is the reception, and that counts for 15% of the overall report, correct?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. How do you also, you're going reception is 15, the service is, spoiler alert, it's 50, and then like how are you kind of putting a percentage on each element? And of course, the class is the most important element, and most people know that. But how are you gauging the other percentages?
It's a really good question. I mean, obviously, to a certain extent, we had to sort of decide on a sort of split, right?
Yeah.
And some people might not agree with it, but really, this process of building this whole thing, it's not really been what me and Matt think. We've had certain ideas, and we pulled in a lot of people, and we've kind of sort of see what the industry thinks should be important. So when we visit a boutique club, let's just use it as an example, right? Let's say, Solid Core for Pilates in the States or Barry's Bootcamp here in London. 50% is the class. So, if the class isn't very good, the whole club's not going to score very well.
Yeah.
And then the other 50% is all the things that happen around it.
Yes.
And so we're quite happy with that split, right? So 15%, for example, is reception services, and the other 35% would be the equipment, the public areas, and also the online presence. And that does go into sales as well. Sales is actually, although there's some online standards around sales, most of the sales process is done in the reception services.
Yeah.
So typically that would be after the class, and that's been our poorest scoring category. It's like a subcategory is sales within reception services, sales and revenue generation, the poorest scoring by a long, long way.
And so where you rate sales within this is in that in-person section when they come into the gym. Yeah,
correct. So 15% is reception services, and then sales will be perhaps 5% of that 15%. 5% of the overall score, a third of that. So that's like a rough breakdown. Do
you think it's so there's some stats that we'll go through, but let's say there is someone selling someone over the phone, the stats may be similar to in person based on their levels of salesmanship in person are probably going to be similar to on the phone, or maybe a little bit worse on the phone, right? It's probably easier to sell in person.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that if it's on the phone, unless we're calling them, but if someone's calling me, I would hope it's someone who's sort of well versed in sales.
Yeah.
Whereas what we've seen, honestly, the fitness industry has scored terribly. Most direct you to an app or a website, which is just an awful experience. And I want to give a little bit of context as well to the evaluation process and how we're very fair. We do not want them to grab you by the collar, drag you back in, and ram a package down your throat. That's not what we're looking for. We will always pretty much put it on a plate. What one standard we look for is checking in how the class was. So let's say I've just done an S&C class, you're at the front desk. I want you to say something like, oh, Jack, how was the class? That's going to, score one of our standards. Oh, it was great. Really, really enjoyed it. Oh, are you based here in London? Oh, yeah, I've just moved here. I'm going to be here for 6 months. You've asked a question, right? So that's going to get a standard as well. Making an attempt to close the package as well. We have about 9 standards around sales, and it's scored awfully.
So the person who's kind of secret shopping will go, oh, so how much is this class? Or I may ask a buying question, interested. So, they're given a lot of signals, and maybe the person might answer, but they don't go, they don't try and close it, essentially.
So let's say, hopefully, they lead the conversation. That's going to score the best, right? So asking questions, for example, okay, they've scored a standard there. I mean, it's a crucial part of sales is to ask a question so you know what they might want and what might be right for them. If they don't do that, then we would almost lay it on a plate. Like, oh, I really enjoyed the class. I've just moved here for 3 months. What kind of programs do you have? Which, as a salesperson, doesn't happen that often, but, it does happen sometimes. We're basically saying, I liked it. I want to continue my training. What are my options? Even then, we get the front desk staff often saying, like, oh, everything's on the website. Just look there. Or, oh, if you just download our app, you can buy it there. And we'll even try, like, oh, do you have anything now? Like one of them, for example, is having some kind of price list that you can show them. Again, we've seen awkward things such as like when you ask to see what the packages are, they'll look around, they'll open a drawer, and then they'll kind of shift the computer around a little bit and just show you like the website, and you're like, okay, thanks for that. I'll think about it, right?
We secret shopped a PT studio in London, and they sold packages for £1,500. And we knew that because we saw it on the website, but we went and asked about the services and the prices, and they on the phone told us to go and look on the website. And it's crazy, right? The level of £1,500 is a hefty amount to pay, like upfront in a package for many, and to be for that entry point of sales, to be told go look on the website does not reflect the service in the slightest.
So I think going from being interested in training to actually doing it, you probably got, let's just say 10 steps to get there, right? And what we need to do as salespeople is take them to the next step, not just ask them to go to another step or like 2 steps ahead. Because once you ask them to do that, they're just probably not going to do it. I mean, downloading an app, come on. You know, am I really going to download the app?
It's such
you know,
a
wait
barrier.
for it to download,
Yeah.
find the packages part, put my details in, not know what package I need. That's the thing.
Yeah.
You know, I downloaded the app, I've looked at the programs, and I'm like, well, I don't know what's right for me. It's just, I just think 90 to 95% of the time you're going to lose the sale. Look, of course, you know, sometimes people are going to really love it, look at 10 sessions and just buy it, but you're going to lose 80% of sales, I would say, by not just asking a couple of questions, maybe showing them a few options based on what you've told me. I think this package might be good for you. What do you think? You know, what we're looking for, it goes back to your original point, is not particularly difficult or complicated. It's just an easy set of steps that really anyone can do. And I think the amount of studios that scored 100% in sales has been, of our 9 standards, only a few.
And so what I find really interesting, and this is just moving slightly to sales before we go back to reception, is that as fitness marketing agency, we are consistently calling people out for their sales performance and sales and sales kind of cadence. And it's kind of like, oh, you're just saying that, you know, we're not good at sales because, like you know what I mean, it's like it's marketing versus sales. There's that classic all time. But the data you have here, it literally shows the average of the performance of sales within the fitness industry, and it's very, very low across the board. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would encourage anyone to listen to part 1.
Yes, 100%, because we'll move on.
We go so deep into sales that we go deep into sales in part 1. I think we talk a lot about the mindset right behind it, and I think it all just sort of comes back to that. And it links so well to part 1 because what we do is we do something that's a little bit unusual, which is we basically say, look, we enjoyed it, we're interested, we want to carry on, and we're still getting, I think in New York, it's 6.5% of studios made an attempt to close the sale. Yeah. And studios are closing left, right, and center, right? And so part 1, we talked about the mindset, and that's important. Part 2, we're saying, we can kind of call out the industry. I sometimes worry that I'm being a little bit too negative with some of the things that I say based on the data, but when 6.5% of studios made an attempt to close a sale, when an evaluator was expressing interest, it's terrible for everyone.
But the thing is it's not just an inquiry. It's someone that's come into your business, they've taken part in a class, and they're asking buyer questions. Yeah. And
how much warmer can you get?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
How much hotter do you really want it? Yeah. It's a little bit, like McDonald's, they would have customers and they just add in that question, like, do you want fries with that, right? That's it's a similar thing. Like that's like a closing question or more like an upsell, right? It's like there needs to be more of an upsell process within those visitor check-ins. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one of it as well is making this is one I find really interesting, is making a recommendation based on the client's needs. So we get this quite a lot, like, we have 50% off a year membership. It's like, well, I'm only here for 3 months, so that's no good for me, is it?
Yeah.
So, and the first stage of that is asking questions. So it's quite basic stuff. I mean, we go to international cities. So, do you live here? How long are you here for? What's your goals? How often do you want to train per week? Probably is all you really need to know,
and then you know
on a
what
basic
the
level.
Be.
And then you can say, look, based on what you've told me, you're only here for 3 months, so we do have a promotion on a year. That one's no good for you. But we also have 25% off 3 months or whatever it is, or buy 2 months, get 1 free, or just like this 3-month package is the one for you, whatever is right for them. I think this would be the right one for you. What do you think? That's all we're looking for. And again, we're just not doing it often enough. So it's not about calling out the industry. Hopefully it's about sparking some reflection on the importance of doing this.
And so let's have a look at the kind of lower average scores across the reception period. So first one is the phone was answered on the first attempt within 3 rings. And I've actually written down 39%. I think it's even lower than that actually in the report, because I've got it to 39 on the next one. But it was a super low percentage of people didn't pick up the phone on the first 3 rings. And I imagine the percentage is still quite low, or maybe didn't even pick up the phone potentially.
Oh yes, yeah. I don't have that stat to hand, but a lot just don't answer the phone, or certainly it's not usually within the first few rings. So again, we want to try and get them while we're hot if we can.
And then cool. Next one. During the phone call, the staff took a genuine interest in the customer. The average stat was 39%. So they've answered the phone, and over 60% of people aren't taking interest in someone that's interested in their services. That's huge. That's massive. You've got people coming to your business, like they're calling you And only less than six, like it's crazy, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So Matthew talks about, my business partner with this, talks a lot about this particular area. When you said kind of fill the gap, it made me think of his presentation yesterday when he talks about minding the gap. So mind the gap is his little phrase. GAP is the 3 things you can do to really be 5-star. And so the first one, the G, is genuine interest. And this is like an absolute fundamental of 5-star hotels or premium service, right? And it can't be sort of fake or forced, but that's where the genuine part comes in. But it's just like, yeah, do you live here? Do you work near here? Like, again, sometimes it just comes up naturally in conversation. In Bangkok, it's easy for me to say, oh, if it's an expat, oh, you based here in Bangkok? How long have you been here for? Do you work in the area? Again, you can obviously get onto their training as well. But yeah, it's like just showing a little bit of interest in them. And I would say, when you do that authentically and genuinely, 90% of people are kind of warm and you have a bit of a chat. The other 10% probably show that they just want to get straight into the training talk, and that's fine, right? There's no harm done there. We've spoken to some club owners and they're like, oh, our clients don't care about that. And I'm like, I don't think that's true. We had someone in Dubai say that, and I'm like, well, our evaluator cares. I actually know our evaluator in Dubai quite well, and she likes to be talked to. She likes to have someone show some genuine interest in her and have a bit of a chat. So I think, yeah, we tell ourselves these stories like our clients don't care, our clients don't want this, but they do. Everyone likes to feel that the person in front of them actually cares about them. And the easiest way is kind of to kind of enjoy this a little bit, to like showing genuine interest, like sort of having a chat to people. The other one, the A, is anticipatory service. So that's kind of foreseeing what they might need. I mean, Matthew uses the example, he was at a hotel in Mexico with his mother, and his mother was kind of cold, and someone came over with like, I don't know, a cashmere blanket or something like that and put it around her, and it's like, oh wow, that's a nice surprise. Or you order like an extra hot Americano with sugar on the side or something, and the next morning they have it ready for you. So those are sort of some 5-star hotel examples, but we got to look at little things like that we can do in the gyms. It can be something super small, right?
That can make such a big difference.
Just a little example of that for base that I like. If someone's sweating a lot and they didn't grab a towel, front desk go over and give one to them. And again, you can see it's like, it's such a small thing.
Yeah.
And you can just see it's like, oh wow, thanks. Like no one ever just sort of takes the towel. Everyone's like, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Because I can guarantee no other gym in Bangkok is doing that. So it's it doesn't need to be the cashmere blanket. It can be like giving someone a towel when they're sweating and they forgot to pick one up.
This is a bit of a random example. Hopefully it's relevant. I was in Nando's yesterday and I ordered the drink, and the waitress came along with the drinks already filled up. So that never happens in Nando's. And I was so pleasantly surprised, but I didn't have to get up and go get it. 100%. I was like, oh wow, yeah. It was such a small thing because obviously the standard is you get up, you go get it. But she brought it over, and I think that's kind of a similar example of that process there.
I have a very similar one to some F&B places I go to in Bangkok. So there's one restaurant I go to, and I like the food there, so I go fairly often, but they never remember who I am or my name or anything like that. And whenever if they give me like the bread, I always like to have some butter to put on it, and they never bring the butter, and I always have to ask for it. And it just kind of annoys me that I have to ask each time. There's it's actually a Dean and DeLuca that I go to very, very infrequently. And the first time I went, I just wanted a paper cup. They usually put it in a plastic one. So paper cup with ice and some lemon and fill it up. I asked once, and I must have gone back about 3 weeks later, got another like sparkling water, and he had it ready for me, the lemon with the ice in. And I was like absolutely stunned. And I was like, wow, he remembered me from 3 weeks ago. I only came once. And it just had this unbelievable disproportionate impact given how small a thing it was. And to him, it was like, I mean, he sort of said hello, but it was like, he didn't make a big deal of it. It was just something that he did. And I was like so impressed. It made me feel so good. And I kind of know what they're doing. He's probably trained to do that. He might have done like a course on it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter even if you know they've been just trained to do that. It still feels good that someone gives a shit and they're actually kind of paying attention.
It just makes you feel cared for, and where you're cared for is where you're going to continue to go versus the other place where they just forget you completely, right?
Yeah, you just feel less warm, you feel less inclined to go back. And I think we need to sort of take these little bursts of inspirations from other industries and just think about how we can apply it. And again, there's a few easy examples, right? If someone's water bottle, they finish the last little bit, if you go and fill it up for them or something like that, right, when they're on the training floor, just little things like that can go a huge way. The P of the gap, the GAP, is personalization. So just making sure that using names would be like an obvious one for that. If you remember that they can't do a barbell deadlift, so you bring the dumbbells over for them, would just be a few examples. Well, that's kind of personalization and also anticipatory service as well. So I think, there's many little things we can do in the industry to learn from these elements.
And so the next one on the reception was staff asked if they enjoyed the session. So afterwards, and that was just 39% on average, asked the participant if they had a good time, if they enjoyed it, before they actually left. So again, huge gap. in
It's
between.
wild, right?
Yeah. And just literally saying, how did you find the session? That's, it's a very simple thing to do, right? But it will probably make a huge difference.
And again, I want to give a little bit more context to the process. We're going to wander up to the front desk. We're going to kind of stand there. We're not looking for them to go, oh, Jack, stop.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy the session? So, 61% of the time, our evaluators going up to the front desk and they're being like, yeah, how can I help?
They're really giving the opportunity for that moment.
Well, yeah.
It's not like they're rushing out or, yeah.
So it's my first time. I walk up to front desk. It should be the most natural thing in the world. It shouldn't really even require training. It should be like, oh, Jack, how was it? Your first time doing a, F45 class or Barry's Bootcamp or Pilates or whatever it is. That's what it should be. It should be natural. And if they're just going, what can I do for you? It's just, it's. I'm not going to say it's not good enough. I'm going to say it's negatively impacting the client experience.
Yeah.
And it's hard to run a business like this.
Yeah, for sure. And again, like as I'm running through this, it's not like everyone's terrible, but it's just it's just like looking at these small things that can make a big difference that actually cost nothing as well. That's the thing. It's not like you have to go out and invest a huge amount into making these changes, to ask someone how their session was or to, show enthusiasm on the phone. It costs nothing, and it also costs no time really not a huge amount of time to do these things, right?
Not time. I think it's I said yesterday after the presentation I did, someone was asking me about it, and I said that these things are simple but not necessarily easy. So it is very simple what you need to do. Really, anyone can do it. You don't need a degree in marketing or customer service or hospitality to do these things. Like really anyone can do it, but you do need the right attitude. And so that's not always an easy thing to do. If the culture of the company is not there, honestly, if you haven't done these things at all for 5 years, it's a bit hard to come in on Monday morning and say, okay, now we're going to do it like this. Honestly, it might take letting go of a few staff. It needs to take the owner or the manager really believing in this and investing into it in different ways. So it doesn't cost any money to show some genuine interest or to ask someone's name, but it might be a lot of investment in terms of training the team and changing the culture. And honestly, like doing it, leading by example as a manager or an owner. Go to the gym, chat to the clients, do these little things, bring a towel to someone who's forgotten to pick one up, right? As a manager or an owner, and people will start to see that, and it will start to kind of trickle down to the company, and it makes it easier for you to then deliver the training the next week. Right, let's do this. Also, as well, it's like another big tip for this: tell the team why it's important. Don't just say, look, I saw a presentation from Jack or I listened to a great podcast. We've got to be doing A, B, and C from tomorrow. Explain how it positively impacts the member journey. One way I like to frame it to our team is like, guys, whether you're with us for a year or 5 years, I want you to be incredible at your job. I want to upskill you. You come to base here, you leave base here. And the way I'm going to do that is you're going to get fantastic at customer service. It's like kind of selling it to them why they should do something like this. In the fitness industry, we have a deeper reason. If we can give people good experiences, they will come back. It will positively impact their lives. Again, it links a lot very well to the stuff we were talking about in part one. If you want to impact people's lives, if you want to change their lives, let's give them a great experience and they will come back regularly.
Amazing. The next one is, we spoke about this a little bit earlier, but questions were asked to help the client find the right package. That was 34% of gyms on average were asking questions to help them find something that's going to accommodate them. And you mentioned that someone might just be in the city for 3 months, or they might not be there or they might be there on a fly-in visit potentially, but that people aren't asking questions to actually steer them towards the service that's going to be appropriate for them.
Yeah, if you don't ask questions, you can't make a recommendation. It's just as simple as that. It just becomes a stab in the dark. And what you want to avoid in this whole process is them just saying, okay, let me think about it. And if you just make some random recommendation, like, oh, we have a 1 week trial promo, are you interested? Let me think about it. Better than that is like, yeah, what led to you coming here today? Of course, you can ask, how was the class? What are your goals? What kind of schedule do you have? What kind of classes do you want to do? Do you think this is suitable to your goals? Honestly, 2 or 3 is probably good for most studios to start with. 4 or 5 would be like an absolute max to them. And again, the way I like to say this is, okay, based on what you've told me, I think this one or this one could be the bike package for you. What do you think? And again, if they say, look, I just want to try out a few different studios, say, okay, we have like a 1 week or a 1 month trial. If they say, I want to change my life, say, okay, we have a 6 month membership. We have a 1 year membership or a recurring monthly membership. So questions are the absolutely crucial first step to just making the right recommendation.
And the last one here, which is probably the biggest gap on this section before we move on to the next, is staff made a strong attempt to close the sale and complete the membership package, with just 18% of people surveyed actually achieving that, which again, a huge amount of people aren't actually going for the close and going to sign people up. Now, I know this is when people are going into the gym, But I also imagine when people are inquiring, whether it's on the phone, the stat is within a similar region, which is huge, right? Actually just asking for the sale.
I think it'd be very reflective of the whole client journey. So I'm sure when people are calling, it's going to be similar. We do the phone inquiry, but it's more about setting us up for the first visit.
Yeah.
We don't do a sales phone inquiry. We might do if we work with a club privately, but as part of our public evaluations, we don't. But look, I'm sure it's 100% reflective, because often it's the person on the front desk who's not attempting to close the sale, who's actually answering the phone. So yeah, I think it kind of speaks volumes about the gap that we need to bridge.
Yeah. And just imagine like where some of these businesses could be if, you know, they had the same marketing spend, the same class, but they just had these systems in place where they were asking questions, they were asking how the session was, they were finding the right package, and when they were going for a close. How much more business and how many more people would be impacted, and how much would the business benefit if those questions were embedded into the business 12 months prior?
Yeah. I do wonder, some of these clubs, I think, well, are you spending anything on ads? Because, let's say just you're spending $1,000 on ads a month, but yet when people are actually coming into the club and doing the class or whatever it is that you push them into doing, they're not being sold to at all. You're just completely wasting money.
Yeah.
You need to sort out this sales process before you even start to bring anyone in. It's needs to be the first thing that's fixed, really. Once you fix that and you say, okay, when someone comes, we're really doing our best to get them started, then you can feed people in, right? You've kind of earned that right to do it.
So that's the reception side, which again covers 15% of this overall review. Now moving on to the class experience. And there's again a number of gaps here. Part of me feels like I'm just being very negative on there, because I think it's important, but I've intentionally picked out the lower ones. Within the reception, there were many more questions, and a lot of them actually scored really, really high and were where they needed to be. And as an overall average, the numbers higher than a lot of these individual numbers. So, but again, I just wanted to point out the gap of where you can see the gap, plug the gap.
Honestly, most people find that the most interesting part.
Yeah.
Like, what am I not doing? So when you view the evaluation report, and you can view it online, or you can download the report, and it's private and confidential for the club, there's actually an option to just see the no results. Like, what are the things that I didn't score?
Yeah, that's the most
and I know that's the first one that the clubs go to. It's like, what didn't I do? What do I need to be doing? So yeah, it's important to kind of caveat that, but I think people need to know the gaps. Because again, if very few studios are doing these things, you can stand out easy. You can have that as your differentiator, because we can say, look, 80% of studios aren't doing this, do it, and you're in that top 20% straight away.
Awesome. So moving on to the class again, which is 50%. So the first one is the coach made an effort to learn the client's name. So about 61% of businesses did that, but again, nearly 40% of customers that are walking in, the coach isn't saying, hey, like, what's your name? Especially if they're a new person. And a lot of these stats that I'm going to reel off, I want everyone to imagine this is someone coming into the gym or the studio for the very first time. So that first one is coach made an effort to learn the client's name, is 61%. The next is the coach used the client's name in the session, which is 45% of people. The coach spoke to the first timers before the session started. It was just 44% of people. The coaches introduced themselves at the start, which is 58%. So again, higher, but still a sizable gap. The instructor explained the structure of the class and times, was 64% of gym survey. And then the coach checked if the client had injuries, which was just 65%. So imagine if you're a new person and they don't ask your name, they don't tell you your name, they don't tell you what the class is going to consist of, they don't ask if you have an injury, and it just starts. Now, I imagine that most people have ticked some but not others, but do you think it's possible that there were some places that just had none of those in place?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So when we built this process in 2022, 2023, we did 100 test evaluations, and I did a lot of those. So I saw great ones and not so good ones, and for sure some people definitely didn't score any of those at all, I think. And I'm kind of, again, I talked about this at PerformX, I think you almost got to obsess over that first timer journey. That is like absolutely crucial. How do they feel when they walk out the door? Do they feel like they belong in this place? Do they feel like they were cared for? Do they feel like they were welcomed warmly? It's either a yes or a no. You don't really get much in the middle. Do they feel like they want to come back?
Yeah.
And if it's kind of quite simple. If these things are done, again, not robotically, it has to be sort of done by someone who wants to do it and sees the value in it. But if these things are done, honestly, when they leave, they'll be like, wow, I can really see myself going back.
Yeah.
And if they're not done, it's a challenge. Maybe that, again, 1-2 times out of 10, maybe they just love the workout and they will come back. But if you don't do these things, it's going to be really, really difficult. And knowing their name and then knowing your name is just, it's a cheat code.
Yeah, something that Tim Reed does from the gym called ETC is every time a client walks in, he will just go like Susie, or the team have been conditioned to do this as well. So as soon as someone walks in, doesn't matter how many times they've come in, that their name is enthusiastically shouted at them because it just makes them feel like they belong, and it's like, welcome back.
Yeah.
And then I love what you said there, because and for anyone listening, let's say you sign them up to a 21-day or program or 4-week or 6-week challenge or whatever it is. That first session, do they leave feeling like they belong to that place? Because like that first time they walk through the door and have that session, that's probably going to be the most impressionable moment of their experience that will determine how long they stay for. You could, let's say you had a terrible first session and try to pull it back. That first impression matters, right?
Absolutely. I want to dig into 2 parts of belonging, what that actually means. So the first one, everyone has a part to play in. That's like I belong as, I felt warmly welcomed. They felt like they were happy to see me. They're like, oh, Jack, good to see you. It was great to talk to you on the phone. Nice to meet you in person. So every single person has a part to play in like belonging in that sense. The second part of belonging is pretty much down to the coach. And that's like, wow, I was a bit worried about doing that S&C session because it always looks so scary to me. And, I see these high rocks athletes and these CrossFit athletes. But you know what? Jack really made sure that session was right for me. My lower back, he found out about that and he tweaked a few of the exercises. He gave me individual attention to my form. And afterwards, he checked in with me to make sure I was all right. I feel like I belong there in terms of a training, in a training way, right? I can see myself doing that 3 times a week and I can feel the benefits of it. So it's training sense of belonging and also like community, let's call it, sense of belonging. And if you get those 2 things right, of course they're going to come back, right? The sales process becomes easy. I think we talked about it before. No matter how good the sales process is, if they don't feel great when they walk out the door, it does not matter how good your email sequence is, your follow-up telephone call, you knock on their door. It doesn't really make any difference if you didn't do those things.
Yeah, like marketing and sales are so important, but as you said, like if the experience isn't there, then this process is a little bit redundant, right? You need to make sure that your marketing selling into a solid and efficient product.
Absolutely,
100%.
And it kind of has to come first, really. Then you can feed money into marketing. Then you can hire you guys and feed people through the door, knowing that the experience is going to be good.
Yeah. Anything else we want to add on to the class or the section before we move on?
I think we touched about it on section 1. You've got to meticulously plan the whole client journey from start to finish, and like what we do at Base, they come at least 25 minutes before to kind of set everything up, and that allows you to do all of these things. What we've seen a lot in the fitness industry is coach will run in 2 minutes before the class starts and doesn't have time to do any of this, right? So as an evaluator or as a client, let's say I might have been there for 20 minutes, but he's running in, or she, quickly moving the equipment around, trying to get started on time. The class starts a little bit late. They lose a point there. Then the class finishes a little bit late. They lose a point there. They didn't get to know my name. They didn't get to do any of the little things that they need to do. So you've got to reverse engineer the whole process to allow the coach to do these things.
Yeah. So so if there's people waiting for the class and they're there before the coach, that's not a very good look.
Not a good look. No,
Yeah.
I mean, some clients get there early, but the coach has got to be there like nice and early. And again, it just looks professional. And it's just to help clubs score well in this process or just deliver a good experience. For example, we look to see the coach or the instructor kind of give an idea of what's coming up in the session, right? And it could be something quite basic. On cycling, it could be like, okay, we're going to do some hill climbs today, and we're going to finish up with some fast songs or whatever it might be, right? So it can be just slightly alluding to it, but just some kind of like, hey guys, this is what you can expect.
Yeah.
In a strength and conditioning session, it'll be a little bit more, right? Okay, we're going to do 8-minute sets, or it's going to be 1 minute on, 20 seconds off, and we're going to do a circuit, or we're going to get in pairs and do this and that. And so it should just be clearly laid out. And again, it all comes back to what we've discussed, which is systems and processes to allow your coaches to do that. Sometimes you can just see that there aren't any systems and processes. It's like, okay then guys, so everyone get on their reformer and we're going to start off with, leg lifts or something. And me as a first-time Pilates user, I'm like, what's going on here? Where do I put my foot? I'm looking at the next person because there was no, check-in with me before, or no proper okay, well, we have Jack, welcome, first time today. Okay, so today, guys, we're going to start off with a nice, easy warm-up. Then we're going to work into this. If you don't have that training and the systems around that, how can you sort of deliver that consistently? And think about me coming in for yoga or Pilates. I'm not comfortable in that environment, so I need all of these little things to feel good about it. If someone's into yoga and Pilates, they should consider themselves going into a strength and conditioning facility. What would need to be done for them to leave feeling good? And I think this is useful to kind of look at it through this lens and actually visit clubs, visit studios. I did this before the Fit Guide. If you are an instructor or a coach, go to a gym, not as a friend of the owner or don't reach out to them. Just go and experience it and see what it was like. How do you feel when you walk out the door?
As a secret shopper yourself, you should go in and just experience other people's gyms and just see how they do things.
Absolutely. Before the Fit Guide, me and my now wife, then girlfriend, we used to visit clubs and studios, and afterwards we kind of compare notes. Like, what did you think was good? What could be improved? And I kind of used that for base. And of course, there was some like, oh man, I loved how they did that. Like Rumble in New York, when we went there, they gave like a fist bump. How's it going? And they often said the names. Oh, first time Jack, well done. Giving a fist bump on the way in and on the way out. It was just like a really cool thing to do, and it was like a nice little touch point with the coach.
And something that everyone listening to this can do is they can look at the guide and they can actually just pick some of the top gyms that have been rated and just go experience it for themselves,
absolutely.
right? And just see what they're doing. And I guarantee there's going to be at least one thing that you go, that's a really good thing. We can bring that into the gym.
Absolutely. You know, go to Foundry, go to House of Fitness, go to the other clubs that have scored well, and soak it up. And often what you'll see, and what I've certainly seen before we start the Fit Guide and since, is that you'll often see things like, man, I need to make sure that's not being done at base or not being done in my studio. But the most important thing is you're seeing it from the client perspective. And honestly, I don't think enough gym owners really do that. Don't just do it in the fitness industry, go to a Michelin star restaurant, stay in a really nice hotel, even a coffee shop, kind of break down what they do. But the coffee I got down the road before I came here, she did a great job. She smiled, she made eye contact, she asked me what kind of milk I wanted, do you want a takeaway or not? I don't know if she asked me any sort of showed any genuine interest, but I think she did a really good job just by doing these sort of simple basic things. And I just find it interesting now to kind of dissect different businesses, how they deliver the experience, and see what I can either learn to put into base or to put into my businesses, or I can learn kind of what not to do.
So actually get out of the fitness industry and look at what other people are doing with, because you're talking Perform X or at Perform X was all about hospitality.
Yep.
It was hospitality in the fitness industry, but experience amazing services in different industries, and there's going to be things you can take away there as well.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, I did say like invest into a 3-star Michelin restaurant. It might cost $1,000. Treat the missus, enjoy it, or the hubby. Enjoy it, but also really soak up every single little thing that they do. And stay in a 5-star hotel, and again, stay in like the best of the best. Go to your Ritz-Carltons, hang around and just see how they craft and create the experience. And you're not going to copy it directly, of course, but you'll just have little bursts of inspiration of little things that you can do. It's like that sort of, my business partner's mother being cold and putting the blanket around. Okay, you're probably not going to do that in your gym unless the aircon's like cranked up high, but just think about the little things that you can do to kind of emulate some of the things that you see in these other industries.
And this question isn't about the data by any means, but with like a base, you've got the larger classes. How do you have anything programming in to make sure people can get progression when they can? So week 1 versus week 12, they're getting progress within certain movements, or
So we've built technology to do that. So it's called Baseline. We built it as like proprietary technology. There wasn't like an off-the-shelf solution for what we wanted to do. And so it's kind of like, sort of like gamified, I guess you could say, but it's kind of a system of tracking and recording results. So let's say, for example, we have it for strength training. So we have like, just say like bench press, for example, it might be like a 9-minute set. Let's say it's like 5 reps and you do 60 kg. So you just tap your name, you tap in 60 kg, and that goes through an app so you can see all of your stats and all of your scores. And then we have it on a leaderboard as well. Let's say we have a 1-mile time trial. Right, so you actually have 9 minutes to complete it. It might take like 6, 7, 8 minutes, something like that. Let's say you do 7 minutes 30. Then the next time you come 15 days later, we would have that same set, and the coach can use your stats and your results on the board as well. So, typically for group class training, it's difficult to have some kind of like, especially, we do 24 people in a class, 30 people in a class. But our coaches have the ability through that technology to make sure that it's kind of right for you. And it's a really good way to personalize it. Again, this would score some of our standards for the Fit Guide. Base hasn't been evaluated, but if it did, this would sort of help because we can personalize it to you. So we can say, last time you did a deadlift of 120 kg, 3 reps. Let's see if we can go a little bit heavier today.
Because some people run a larger class, like something they might struggle with is people come, but maybe they're struggling to see that the results or the improvements. But with like that app, that will show them their improvements as they continue to record.
And that's in the class, right? We have like a scoreboard on the screen, so it really helps the coach kind of personalize it. So that kind of gives us a little bit of an unfair advantage, but honestly, you can do it. We talk a lot at Base about building like client profiles. Do people like to be pushed or not? Do they like to have a chit chat about what they did on the weekend or not? Do they like to go heavy or not, right? Are they fine with barbell work, or do they need to be regressed to like kettlebells or dumbbells, right? And so you should be building up a client profile for everyone that comes in. Of course, it's difficult Saturday morning, 24 people, 30 people in the class. It does make it harder, but really it can be done, especially for your regulars or people that come a lot. And I think the first step to doing this or learning names or any of it is just making a proper effort towards actually doing it. I think too many coaches and I've been stuck in this when I was a coach, you kind of go through the motions a little bit, right? You kind of lose your focus on some of these things. Certainly with names, it's a common one. So just say, I'm not very good at remembering names. And you're just giving yourself this free pass to like never remember anyone's name. The first step is to say, no, it's hard to remember some people's names, but I'm going to make a real effort. I'm going to cheat a little bit and look on MindBody or Glovebox and see what their name is. Or I'm just going to ask them, I'm really sorry, I can't remember your name. Can you remind me? And just make that actual effort to do it. So again, it comes back to in a similar way to sales, I think. It's like a mindset thing.
Yeah. And so we're now, we've gone from the class experience. Now let's move on to the equipment, which covers 10%. Now we're probably going to be here quite briefly because the overall average across every single section was 89%. And so for me, my takeaway was gym owners love equipment.
Yes.
As in, you know, the thing that they focus on the most over anything else is, you know, they might invest in the best equipment, but they don't invest in other things that will actually make people come and use the equipment.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably put equipment and facilities in public areas into one sort of similar group, which is kind of like the tangibles. And we similar to hospitality, like 5-star hotels, we broke it down in a similar way. It only counts for 25% of the whole experience. So look, it's important. It's hard to get 5-star or to score highly if it's just terrible. If the equipment's, you know, you've got only 2 to 8 kg dumbbells and, you know, the carpet's fraying and it just doesn't look very nice, then it's not very clean. You're not going to score particularly well. But what's more important is kind of the human interaction. We are doing well in these areas. And it's always sad when I see this stunning studio with like amazing dumbbells, treadmills, beautiful lighting, really nice hangout area, really nice bathrooms, Kiehl shower gel, Dyson hair dryers. And the class just sucks. The coach doesn't look like they want to be there. They arrive late. The receptionist is just on their phone. I'm like, man, you've invested literally millions into this area, but not into the stuff that really matters. So look, we are doing that quite well in the fitness industry, especially in sort of big international cities. It's great that we are, but I just want to see a bit more of a shift of focus to the other areas.
So actually, if you had to choose in terms of having a super flashy equipment in a public area versus an incredibly smooth coach-led experience, you take the coach-led experience versus the kind of flashy equipment public area because it's 50% versus, you know, 10% for equipment essentially.
I mean, in terms of our process, yes. If you just look at purely what do we look for at the Fit Guide, well then yes, because 75% is like the human contact, the interactions, the coaching, all of that stuff, right? But even just if you look at the reason we've weighted it in that way, it's just because of running a business, right? Or creating an experience. No brand in fitness, challenge anyone to tell me a brand that has done well just based on incredibly beautiful fit outs and they just kind of neglected the rest. Whereas the other way around, there is countless brands who've absolutely smashed it. Independent gyms, even like big chains, where you walk in and the design's not that great, the logo, the color scheme might look a little bit naff, the branding's maybe not all that good. The equipment, yeah, it has to be functional, right? But let's say it's quite basic. It's not high-end equipment. But the coaches are awesome. They make you feel great. They learn things about you. They use your name. They make you feel part of the community. You walk out and think, man, that's amazing. I want to go back. You just don't get that with a beautiful fit out. It might make a nice Instagram post. You know, it might make a nice shower afterwards, but you're not going to want to go back. And you can't build a brand on that.
And I think that just goes to show that, you know, like so many times where a gym owner goes, oh, I could, you know, invest in my sales systems, my marketing systems. And they go, I'm actually going to buy this piece of equipment for 15 grand or buy some new toys for the gym. And it's like there's one that will actually positively impact your business for the better and the other that will just not really make a huge difference in the grand scheme of things. So it's like, yeah, the service is, you know, the product of the experience when someone walks in is the most important, and the systems around that. And of course, it is important to have a nice aesthetic, but it's not the most important thing. But I believe a lot of gym owners believe it is.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you have a big box facility, then it's more important. And if we go into that area, which we are planning to do, that will definitely be weighted, right? We're going to have to see a big range of dumbbells. Cleanliness is going to be more important, perhaps. All of these things, right? Range of facilities. You know, if they have sleep pods and hangout areas, that will score much higher. So for big box, it's like different. And I think, you know, maybe gym owners kind of think, oh man, I want this amazing leg press. So like, I'll get it in because I think that's like super cool. But if you have a high touch point, like person coach led business, you have to sort of really focus on the other areas. So although we do look at boutique clubs, look, small group personal training for sure, personal training for sure, or if you do have a big box but you do a lot of classes and you want that to be sort of a high standard, then yeah, you've got to invest in the other areas as well, really.
100%. Amazing. So we've done equipment and then also public areas, again, kind of similar in terms of looking at the aesthetics and everything there. And then the final one was just digital and technology, and you touched on this. And the one thing that I noticed was, any messages on social media that were replied to within 2 hours, it's just on average, it's 39% of businesses.
Right.
So it kind of goes back to that sales point again, but in terms of people coming who are inquiring, people are still quite slow to get back to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And again, we send it sort of during a peak hour. We're not going to send it in the middle of the night or anything like that. So we do really give like ample opportunity to respond. Yeah, I mean, you need to find a system that can do that, whether it's dedicated staff, whether it's your front desk staff. But yeah, we've already talked about it in terms of sales, but in terms of general inquiries. Even if it's not necessarily like a sales inquiry, it could just be like, is this class suitable for beginners? If you get back to that 2 days later, they're probably going somewhere else, right?
And based on the data that you have gathered and your experience, what are the biggest mistakes do you think gym owners are making?
I think we've touched on a lot of them. I think we are, spending too much on things that just don't impact the client experience as much. I think I know we talked about it so much, but just having a negative attitude towards sales, I think it's just been so common. And the data's great and it's really fascinating and interesting, but really what's been equally as interesting is the conversations that we've had with club owners. And I think what we've really seen is none of this happens by mistake. Very rarely do we speak to a gym owner who's like, I focus on sales and I focus on systems and this is how we train our team. And it just all sounds incredible, but the experience is terrible. It always kind of makes sense. When a gym owner says, we don't want to pressure our clients, the sales process always scores really poorly, right? When we ask them what kind of systems and regular training do you have with your team, and they kind of like look a bit awkward and not sure what to say, we can see that the check-in process, the first timer process isn't really there. So there's always this like real correlation between the work they do in the background and the actual end result in the client experience. I think often as an owner, you've got to focus on these intangible things. You've got to believe in it. You've almost got to like sell it to your team why it's good, why it's important, and that will trickle down.
And when did this guy get released, by the way? Because this is the 2024 one we're referring to. Correct?
Yes, correct. The actual evaluation period would have been like kind of mid 2023 to mid 2024. So it's about 6 months out of date,
and so if you will.
But what we want to see is improvements on the next one.
Yeah,
we've just launched New York, and we have seen overall improvements, which I would hope it's maybe something to do with the Fit Guide. Hopefully, people have upped their game a little bit. We always make the reports fully available to the clubs. Cycling is the only modality which has dropped a little bit, which is interesting.
And do you go to the same clubs or different clubs or a little bit of both?
A little bit of both, yeah. So we typically would go back to the clubs that we've been to unless they've closed. Some have closed, being a year or so later.
This is going to maybe sound like quite an obvious question. Were the ones that closed the ones that were lower scoring? Were there any that were super high up?
Some, yeah. So I think there is a mix of things that can contribute to a club closing, right? It could be like landlord putting up the rent, for example. It could be a whole host of things. I mean, honestly, it's been a whole mix, to be honest. We have definitely seen some clubs where they've just scored terribly and they've closed, and you're like, that kind of makes sense. Like the ones that we talked about in the last episode in Bangkok, right? I know that clients that we sold to had inquired there and hadn't heard back from them, and then they closed 6 months later. So sometimes you can just see like, yes, that makes sense. But sometimes, you have a good, or it could be, cycling isn't as hot as it was. Right, so Pilates is kind of the thing now. Cycling clubs are struggling, to be honest with you, like indoor cycling.
Is that starting to take a dip across the border, you see, in terms of like spin studios?
Just the number of spin studios. So, sometimes they've scored quite well. They are actually delivering a good experience, but they might have high prime New York rents, and cycling's just not quite as popular, and they're struggling because of that. So look, I think this stuff certainly contributes towards having a successful business, but of course there are other factors as well, right? Maybe... I think this is probably quite a common one. They might score really well on the experience. Sales they didn't score well on, but they scored so well on everything else, they're still a 5-star club, right? Because again, the sales, it's important for a business, but doesn't really affect the client experience too much. So they're actually delivering a fantastic experience because they're not selling well. they fail as a business. I think that's quite common.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not like, oh, in a perfect world, I guess, the clubs that are delivering a great experience do fantastically, and the ones delivering a poor experience do badly, because there's other factors involved that we don't necessarily look at through the average client's perspective. We wouldn't always see that. And I think honestly, sales and marketing would be the biggest one. Yes, we do have standards, but because we look at the average person's experience, we're not going to know how impactful that was. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And you mentioned that cycling has become less popular. Pilates has had a huge increase. I think I've got here 84% from 2023 is where it's up. So, and we spoke about this earlier because you had trends versus fads, and a fad up and down, and trends just consistently moving up. So, is Pilates where would you put that trend or fad?
Yeah, Pilates is absolutely a trend for sure. I mean, it's been around for like 100 years or so, and it's really seen it, sort of studying the boutique industry, sort of seen it slowly increase, like bit by bit, year by year, really for the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years. And then Pilates studios that got in early on that, such as Solid Core or Strong Pilates would be another example. The ones that got in early, Solid Core just got valued at $750 million, right? So
Wow.
hugely successful. So it's definitely a trend, a long-term trend. I've talked about this as well, like on my podcast and publicly. Soul Cycle in 2006, I would have looked at that and said, that's a fad. People dancing on a bike, I would have called it. That's going to be not around in 2 years, but that has shown itself to be a long-term trend. So even as short as sort of 5 years ago, it was absolutely massive, right? There were cycling studios everywhere. But now that Pilates has had this sort of uptick, well, not an uptick, but like a slow, gradual increase, cycling has definitely dropped off. Look, clubs are still reporting good numbers. Some big box clubs I know are still doing well with their cycling classes, but Soul Cycle's closed a lot of locations. It's just not quite as hot and not as popular as it was. Now, it could come back, 5, 10, 20 years down the line.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, is that just a year's worth of data it's trending downwards, or is it been gradually trending downwards for a longer period of time?
It's been a few years now, I think. Yeah, I think over the last 3 years we've seen it. We don't really look so much at this for the fit guy. We look more at the standards, right? But just sort of my observations of the boutique fitness industry and being quite connected to it and seeing kind of clubs like Soul Cycle. I think they've closed about 20 or 30% of their clubs, I believe. Yeah, as Pilates is on a gradual increase, I think for the last 3 years, cycling's just been on a dip. Look at Singapore, it's the same thing.
Do you think there's danger in these studios that kind of have a USP as their class? Do you think there's a danger of those becoming stagnate and they stagnate and then they start to decline? Like, let's say like they just do cycling, or there's lots of workouts. There's lots of, whether it's independent or larger ones that have the treadmill and the kind of like box with all the weights concept on there, right? Yeah. So like you've got these, like, do you think there's a threat of those becoming redundant because they're very unique, if they just focus on that one type of session?
Yeah, you are leaving yourself a little bit open to that if you have one very specific type of workout. So I think a good example of this, and I would call it a trend, but in some markets I would say it's acted like a fad, which is your Rumble style water bag boxing.
Yeah.
So again, I think you'd have to call it a trend worldwide because it was popular sort of 8-9 years ago, and it's still popular in some markets. But Singapore, it had a very fad-like lifespan, so it just exploded in popularity. Studios opened everywhere. They were all doing quite well, so more opened. Singapore's quite entrepreneurial. People will see something doing well and they'll open their own ones. You see these kind of quick life cycles often of concepts. Explosion upward, then everyone gets a little bit bored of it and they start closing quickly. Everyone's got a bit bored and they're now suddenly doing Pilates. They're not doing water bag boxing. So suddenly the bottom 30% just close like that. The next 30% close slowly after over a year or so. And then maybe you've got 1 or 2 left that just managed to survive. So I think, by seeing something that was popular and going, that's doing well, I'll go and open that, they're leaving themselves quite exposed. What I quite like about Base, the gym that I run, is we can adapt a little bit easier.
I was just about to say this. So because you've taken on High Rocks, now obviously High Rocks is massive and it's going up and up and up. But I don't see any signs of it slowing down in the short term, but if it was to become less popular, you could just stop doing High Rocks and you've still got that core product. And you can also adapt that core product as it goes, because it's not a concept necessarily, is it? It's something that it's a process that you've adapted over time, and that will probably change over time as well, I imagine.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting one to consider actually. So again, we were quite naturally suited to High Rocks anyway. We had Concept 2 rowers, air runners. We didn't have we had 1 or 2 skiers. We had to get a few more of those. We had wall balls. We had sandbags. So it was quite an easy, natural switch. And so then it makes it more natural for the brand, right? It was kind of obvious. You look at Base and you look at our clients and our type of training, and it's well suited to High Rocks. So it was an easy switch. As a brand, you do have to consider like how far do we want to go into high rocks, right? We don't want to be a high rocks gym. We've still got our base classes, like base camp is our signature class, mix of strength and conditioning. We've got technology that surrounds that. So it's that decision as a brand, how much do you lean into it? And look, high rocks will not be popular forever, right?
Yeah.
I think it'll be around for a long time. But let's say in 5 years, will it be as popular as it is now? I don't think so, right? Could still be big. I just don't think it'll be quite at the heights that we're seeing now. So if you lean too much into a brand and then suddenly something else comes along, yeah, you need to make sure that you're adaptable.
Well, is it if you become 100% a high rocks gym and put all your eggs in that basket in 5 years, is that going to serve you and be
You have to
beneficial?
be very careful.
Yeah.
It might be really good for you for 3 years, but when things switch, the other gym that's kind of not leaned in as much might be in a much better long-term position. Look, our high rocks classes in Bangkok, and don't forget we haven't had a high rocks race yet in Bangkok. The first one's in May. They are rammed, and so it's quite. People want to try it out. They've heard about it.
To have the affiliation right now is super beneficial, basically.
Absolutely, and it's like that balance of like we want to put on more high rocks classes, but we don't want to dominate the schedule. We want to have like our standard strength training class. We want to have like our signature class, base camp. We want to make sure we've still got that, and it doesn't dominate the schedule. And it is a balancing act, but I think every gym should think about that. And well, again, what's your differentiator? If your 10 gyms in town are all high rocks gyms, you do become another high rocks gym. So it's just something to consider, and there's like a few layers, I guess, to unpacking it.
Speaking of, becoming another high rocks gym or another, or kind of falling into a category, some data that you showcased around ClassPass is that reservations are up by 51% since 2023. And what I wanted to ask, because this is a great way for people to get access to the gym or to classes or to people's gyms and get them through the door. However, is there simultaneously a threat that if your business is predominantly ClassPass, that you're kind of being categorized along with all these other businesses and your value will now be determined by the other businesses and you become more commoditized than unique? Is that like, if I'm wrong, shut me down, but basically that's kind of what I see with, if you place all the options into one kind of shopping center, if that makes sense, then your kind of your products are all against each other, and then it's not necessarily about how unique you are, because some people might just go to this one because it's the same thing, but it's cheaper, or
I moved the cup there because I'm about to get animated because I care about this, right? So ClassPass is like an opportunity or it's a threat, and it can really be one or the other. And if you use it in the right way, I really do believe it's an opportunity. It's here to stay. Again, I'm not sure so much in the small towns in the UK. If you have a small gym there, it's probably not as prominent, and you probably have to have a bit of a different focus because your client base is going to be much less transient. They probably lived, born and bred in that little town, right? So it's quite different the way you should view it. But if you look at the bigger cities, London, Bangkok, New York, Dubai, ClassPass is here to stay. You probably can't ignore it, to be honest with you. And almost every brand, even the ones that ignored it, are now on it, like SoulCycle, Barry's, Rumble, who historically weren't on it. So you kind of have to play in some way. Now, the first thing you kind of need to do is you need to have a brand, honestly, that ClassPass wants to work with. Because if they want to work with you, they'll give you basically a better deal, and you can set the terms a little bit more. So Base, when they came into Bangkok in 2018, was identified as a studio that they wanted to work with. So it made it easier for us to negotiate like a minimum rate that we wanted. And I think that's important. That minimum rate needs to be comparable to your normal rate, right? If it's less than your normal rate, you're kind of screwed, right? Because if it's less than your normal rate, then what's the point in getting a full membership? You might as well just become a ClassPass member. So that's the first thing to consider. Also, you always want to make sure that your full membership is better than coming on ClassPass. So I would say do not release all of your classes on ClassPass. Your peak classes don't put on. Limit the number of slots.
So you could actually use it to fill in quieter classes, essentially. Like say you got some in the middle of the day, I'm gonna put that on ClassPass so I can fill that up. But my core classes or my prime classes, they're reserved for members.
You've got to be a little bit clever with it. So let's say, for example, like 6 and 7 p.m. might be our peak classes at Base. So we might limit the number of slots there or have no slots to ClassPass. But then 8 p.m. and 5 or 4 p.m., we have a few slots. Or we even open those classes up, right? So people might start coming to those classes, and then they're like, you know what, it's costing me X amount, but actually if I just get a base membership and train a little bit more often, it's going to be cheaper per session. I can book any class that I want. We give a few extra. We got an in-body scan, for example, and you can only use that if you're a ClassPass. If you're a regular base member, if you're a ClassPass member, you have to pay extra. So we're just always trying to make sure that a full membership is better than a ClassPass membership, and it needs to be hands down better if you want to train fairly often. Now look, if you want to dip into base here and there, like once a week, once every 2 weeks, it's fine. You can lose ClassPass. It's a little bit more per session, and that's okay with us, and we get paid quite well. But you've got to always make sure there's that strong differentiation. The final part of the puzzle, I would say, is treat your ClassPass members really well. So what we see quite often, what I've seen quite often, I've experienced firsthand, is you kind of get treated like a second-class citizen.
I see. If you're a ClassPass, you're not a proper... Because you're saying, obviously, the members should have more benefits, but don't treat those people badly.
Not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, so some ClassPass members, we get paid really well. Like, they'll train at base 3 times a week, and they like that because they actually go to, like, some other strength and conditioning studio because they've got a strength class they like. They go to a Pilates class, a yoga class. You can book massages in. So they are, like, ClassPass through and through. They're not going to buy a membership. We actually get paid more than some of our full members. So, we should treat them well. And it's almost like a mindset thing or a philosophy that, anyone that comes to base is part of what we do, and we should treat them really well and give them a first-class service. Look, things like in-body scan is a bit different, but again, that's a tangible. The intangibles, let's say, the 75%, the touch points should all be the same. We should learn their name, we should welcome them in the same way, and we should treat them well. And that means they actually want to become a member. I've experienced it firsthand. Being treated like almost subhuman because you're ClassPass, or sometimes little snide comments and stuff like that, because a lot of the gyms resent ClassPass. And again, maybe it's the deal they have, maybe they don't like ClassPass are taking their percentage perhaps. You can't see it like that. Again, ClassPass can be a threat if you don't use it well, but you have to see it as an opportunity and you have to lean into it, I think.
So the opportunity being, this is an opportunity to wow people with your service once they do come in. I completely see what you're saying, because if you're using it and then you're resenting everyone that's coming in, then are they going to come back?
It could end up being even worse. And again, I think it's because not everyone loves ClassPass at all. You look at we're not getting paid enough, or they take too big a percentage, or whatever it might be. But if you feel like bad about the people that are coming through the door, not only are they not going to join, they're not going to come back on ClassPass. They're not going to recommend you to anyone. Maybe they come and drop in and do a CrossFit class. They were never going to join as a member. But when their friend wants to do CrossFit, you'd be like, oh, you got to go to this one. It's amazing, right? I only dropped in there on ClassPass, but they treated me so well. They gave me such a good class. Not really for me, but you should definitely go there. And these are the things that you don't see, this kind of, positive sentiment that's like spreading through the community. So treat everyone well that comes through the door. Again, every interaction matters with every single person that walks through the door. Treat them well, give them a great experience, give them a great session, and good things will generally happen. And ClassPass just sort of, it fits into that.
A couple of questions that I want to wrap up on is, my first question is, where do you see the industry going? There's a lot of, talk about blood work, breath work, wellness, ice bath, saunas, all of these things that are quite trendy right now. And the second question is about that word, trendy. What's the difference between like a fad and a trend? I know a fad is up and down, but what would you say are the key differences that make something a trend which is here to stay versus a fad that is currently popular but maybe isn't going to last super long?
Yeah, I'm breaking that down one by one. So I think starting off with the trend versus fad. So fad typically gets popular very, very quickly and often drops off. So you might have very few, to use the example from before, water bag boxing. Then a year later, you've got 20 studios that do water bag boxing in Singapore, and it really was about there. And then 2 years later, you've got 15. A year later, you've got 12. And now maybe you've got 3. So that's definitely a fad-like thing. It was over a few years. So it's not like literally this month it's popular, next month it's not. But I would kind of put that in the fad category for Singapore, right? And there's some markets where that particular concept is doing well. Trends, I think, and again, it's fairly arbitrary, I guess you could say, but for sort of 5 years in a row, you're seeing an increase. And so it kind of generally happens a lot slower. And I think we've really seen that in Pilates. Probably seen some big jumps up as it's become more and more popular. Some certain celebrity might do it. It might get a bit of a bump up. But really, for the last 5 years, I've seen, looking at the boutique industry worldwide, Pilates has just got more and more popular. And I think we might even see another year, maybe even 2 of growth before it really levels out. Then when it starts to dip, I think we mentioned this earlier in the podcast, it's that bottom sort of 20 or 30% that are going to start to struggle, but it just happens a lot slower. S&C, I guess, has really sort of stayed, again, that's certainly strength training for sure has been an increasing trend for 14 years since I got in the fitness industry. So strength training, that's one of the strongest trends you could
like
possibly
resistance
have.
training is just going up and up and up, essentially.
I mean, the last 14 years, it's just got more and more and more popular. So it's this real slow. If you look at Bangkok, it's been really interesting as well. More women doing strength training. 14 years ago, Thai women would not do strength training. Now our strength classes are like 70%, 80% female, right?
Wow.
Which is awesome. So you've seen this very gradual increase. There's more research coming out on the benefits. Over 50s, over 60s need to be doing it as well. So that's like as much of a trend as you can get, even deeper than a trend. I'm not quite sure what you would call that, but it's like a long-term like shift towards things we should be doing. Rhythm cycling, again, as I've already mentioned, I would expect it to be a bit more up and down, soul cycle type rhythm cycling, but that's sort of, I would say, been a real trend, right? 15 years of growth, and it's kind of leveling up, and then it's coming down. So really we want to be, and I've talked about this publicly, you want to invest in trends, right? And really you want to get there early. If you opened up a Pilates studio 5 years ago and you were doing a fantastic job of building the experience, you'd probably have a really good exit now. And there's a few brands in America that have had massive exits or are building really, really big companies. If you're starting a Pilates company now, it's going to be a little bit riskier,
a bit more
right?
competitive.
Yeah, I would say strength training, because it is such a long-term, deeper shift in the market. You could absolutely start a strength training studio now, but we all know that has huge benefits, right?
If you're in let's say like a town where it's got a semi-decent population, but it's not massive, and there's no other Pilates business, do you think that's a good opportunity to create one? Yeah.
Actually, Bangkok I think if I could duplicate myself, I'd open a Pilates studio, because I think there's not many good Pilates concepts. I think it would do really well.
Yeah.
The ones that are open are doing well, and I just sort of think there's a gap in the market that needs to be filled. Another differentiation, so strength training, I think, has become so popular because it has genuine huge benefits.
Yeah.
Right, and we all know that. We can feel it when we do strength training. The research is backing that up. So it's so rooted in results and health
that it can't kind of go down.
I don't think it will. I can't see it going down anytime soon, right? Whereas
because
something
the
like
results
water
are
bag
there.
boxing, this is kind of fun and different, and the music's on, but tomorrow I want to do something different, right?
Yeah,
because it's not based on really results; it's based on fun.
Yeah, because that's just a form of cardio, and there's many different ways to do cardio, right? Whereas with resistance training, there's not too many different methodologies.
Hasn't really changed, right? Really,
yeah, that's
it.
Yeah, picking things up and putting them down, right? That's here to stay, essentially, because as you said, the results are always going to be there.
I would feel very comfortable investing into strength training concepts. And now what we're seeing, which is great, 14 years ago, just strength would have been a differentiator. Now you need to get more niched. So, for example, one of our coaches, his thing is strength for over 50s. So some of his clients are like in their 70s, I think one or two even in their 80s, and that is his thing. And so, 14 years ago in Bangkok, it would have been far too niche. There's probably only one 65-year-old in Bangkok that wants to do strength training, so you've got to find him or her and train them. But now it's so much more developed, so many more people are doing it, so many more people are recommending that their parents do it as well. You can have this like little niche. You could definitely have a coach that just focuses on strength training for people that are injured. Like I do strength for people that want to, work around injuries and kind of recover from injuries. Obviously, female strength has become massively popular. So it starts branching out into all these other like interesting areas.
And so what do you think about, like that more wellness element with the gyms combined, like blood work and saunas and ice baths? Do you think they are... I don't want to put you in any controversial position, but like, are they trends? Are they fads? Are they and again, it's not that you have to be 100% correct, but just kind of your general scope on it right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at sort of recovery, ice bath, things like that, I think what you've got to be careful with as a club or any kind of operator is just chucking in a sauna, chucking in an ice bath, because kind of everyone's doing that, right? So I think you have to really consider, what does your brand stand for? How does it really fit into what you do? So at Base, for example, I was thinking yesterday at Perform X, actually adding in some extra elements to our personal training program would be fantastic. Maybe some kind of, blood work I think would be good. Again, I think getting blood work is not a trend. It's something that massively has value, just like strength training. So it really got me thinking like, blood work, maybe some kind of DNA analysis. Don't know too much about that, but I think these things have huge value. Of course, we offer in-body scans, anything else that kind of we can go deeper into that to really show how people are improving and progressing. Fantastic. If you're just but it has to be really integral to our concept. We have to really lean into it. We have to sell our clients on why this stuff's important. We have to put on content around it, education. We kind of have to do it properly. I think what some brands certainly just need to be careful of is just kind of chucking it in without giving it much thought. And the classic one we've seen is having like an ice bath or a sauna just kind of added to it. And it's, we've got ice baths and sauna then. Again, it kind of looks the same as all the other gyms that are just putting in ice baths and saunas. And also I think it has great value. Again, it's been around for thousands of years, the whole idea of hot and cold therapy. So I think it has value, but I just don't think it's going to be quite as popular in 5 years or 10 years. There'll kind of be something else that'll be popular and something else will be done. So I think about your brand, think about how it really fits into your offering, think about whether you really believe in it or not. I think that's huge. Don't do it because it's trendy, because you heard it at Perform X or another conference or listen to a podcast about it. Do it because you believe in it. And because you believe in it, you can then sell it to your client base. So yeah, hard to give sort of direct black and white on it, but I think a few things you have to consider as a brand on whether you should adopt it or not.
Amazing. So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap everything up there. Before we do, where can people find more about you specifically? Like, what's your Instagram handle? And also, just if anyone missed it at the start of the part one, where can they find out more about the Fit Guide and download all those resources there?
Yeah, LinkedIn's probably best. If you type in Jack Thomas, I'll probably come up, or /Fitness Business Asia. That's where I'm most active. Thefitguide.com, basebangkok.com if you want to see what we do at Base. And then Fitness Business Asia is my podcast. So you can just type that in anywhere, Google or Apple or Spotify, Fitness Business Asia, and then it pops up. And I think we mentioned earlier on as well, we'll offer a free report to everyone from fitness marketing agency, all your clients and listeners. So they can just go onto the Fit Guide on the homepage and claim the report. And I would urge, whatever your position is in the fitness industry, coach, manager, business owner, you will learn a lot.
Yeah, I learned, but before even speaking with you, just going through the report, I learned so much in terms of where these gaps are, and I found it so fascinating. So I 100% recommend going ahead to check it out. And Jack, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and being on the show.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.